fat bike now has a headlight and a tail light for riding at night. For those of you who didn't see the post on Twitter, I quit the 9 to 5 on Friday. I do have somewhere else to go next week, and then from there, who knows? But for now, we have some unfinished business to take care of with this Android x86 thing.
The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
At some point, I imagine somebody's going to say, hey, you only have 4 gigs of RAM in that machine, you don't want to increase the RAM, why don't you just try the 32-bit version of Android x86? So that's what I'm going to do. The x86 Marshmallow release, basically stable release 3, 32-bit version. I don't think the results are going to be much better, but just to cover all the bases, let's burn the disk. Let's use gparted to nuke Linux one more time. Although I'm sure I'm going to end up putting it back on here. Look at that. Automatically created. Back in the early days of Linux, you had to key all that in manually when setting it up. Linux has come quite a long way, although I don't think it's ever going to be anything more than an enthusiast OS versus Windows. Either way, that's another discussion for another day. The drive is completely nuked now, and once again I'm going to recycle this old Remix OS CD, or DVD, excuse me, one last time. Once this finishes, we can start loading the 32-bit version and see if 3264 makes a difference. And again, I don't think it will. Okay, let's make this a blank NTFS like I'm about to put Windows on this thing. Since Android x86 can run on NTFS, blah 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 blah, let's try this again. Feels like I've done this a bunch of times. Actually, it's because I have. Come on, Linux-ish! Android x86. You are about to format your NTFS thing to NTFS again. All data will lose. Oh yeah. Sorry if my data's a loser. Please put grub on the... What? Windows partition? Yeah, it's NTFS, but heck with it. There's nothing on this disk. Unless, of course, don't want to do any debugging or anything. I just want to see this work. If it's gonna work, I want to see it work. Expect to write 574, 860 kilobytes. Thank you, I'll put it on my to-do list for later. Yeah, this is totally like old school Linux. I've said this a bunch of times, but fortunately, people are chiming into the comments like, yeah, that totally looked like something thrown together by someone in their garage, or whatever that comment was earlier. Yeah, this is a tad vintage, even for Linux-y type stuff. Okay, let's try rebooting again. Although, unfortunately, it's gonna boot off of the CD first. So I'll probably be back to the menu. Can I use F12 to change my boot device to the SSD? Probably. I love this screen, though. I gotta find the bigger version of it and make it my TV at some point. I don't know what I want to do with the old TV, though. Let's see here. Ah, here we go. Alright, so, hard disk, please. Oh, and you get to pick the SSD. Sweet! Come on, let's see what this thing does. Tgrub, loading stage blah blah, grub loading. Yeah, Android x86 6, please. Booting the kernel, and... looks very Linux-y. Yes! That was the difference! So, 4 gigs of RAM or less, run the 32-bit client. Finally! Now I can actually see what this is all about. And of course, those of you who like to post comments lampooning me every chance you get, go ahead, start laughing. I've been made to look like a complete and utter idiot. What this does mean, though, is that I should put this on a thumbstick or get a little more experimental with rubbish later on. Maybe see if I can put Android 7.1 Nougat on this thing with that release candidate thing that didn't work earlier. Sweet! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Android x86, finally! However, I'm not about to go doing anything too exciting just yet, because now I'm curious if that Nougat release candidate will work in 32-bit mode. So I'm actually going to blank this and install it all over again. Just to try this out. Getting a little ahead of things here, I already nuked and reset the drive to NTFS one blank partition for the Nougat version of Android x86, and now I just gotta put the thing in the drive and push the button to restart. For now, though, let's hook up the spaghetti cable while the disk is burning on the other side of the geek house. Nougat, 32-bit. Let's try it. It, and another it for good measure, or something like that. It. This reminds me of other times that I've repeated words, or others on YouTube have repeated words. Doo-dah, doo-dah. Come on! You old piece of junk! Go easy on the computer, man! No, I'm not gonna be like those people that talk to machines and go like, come on, baby! No. It's a machine. It's a device. And, yeah. Anyways. Booting the kernel, Android x86, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and... Hello, Nougat release candidate that didn't work last time! So, I guess the 4 gigs of RAM is a pretty good threshold to determine 3264 with, because that piece of junk rubbish only has 4 gigs of RAM too. Was this really what the problem was all along? Let's mess with this thing.
Okay, I'm in. I was actually able to use my smartphone to copy my accounts over, but unfortunately, it's out of storage. I haven't installed anything on here. 149 out of 149 gigs used. I think I'll stick with release versions of this only, and drop this thing back down to Marshmallow. Okay, so I've got an install going on Rubbish too, in addition to the really slow one now on the Silver Bullets. I'm going to take a guess right now that the computers are not going to turn out to be a good thing to put Android x86 on, and I should probably have just put it on this piece of junk network in the first place. So, when this thing finished, everything came back up and everything worked, but there was only 500 megs of internal storage. So I'm guessing this user directory that you key in at a minimum of 512 megs is actually the storage space you have for everything. So what I've got going on here is 100,000 megs or 100 gigs of storage space being set up on the SSD on this thing, so I know it's got enough space for it. Which is why I don't think Android x86 is a good OS for any of my computers, because these towers all have room for multiple drives. Now your average mobile device that runs Android has internal storage, and then everything else is plugged in, even the permanently mounted SD cards. So, I don't think any of my towers are going to work out. I'm going to let these both continue until one of these finishes and works, but I think what I would end up doing is running Rubbish on old laptops that only have the physical space for one drive, and then everything else has to be plugged in. That would be more in line with how mobile devices work, and it wouldn't waste. In this case, this thing I think has 2 other drives in addition to the SSD in it. So, I don't see this working out for the towers. Whichever one of these finishes first, it'll probably be Rubbish. That's what I'm going to go with, and I'll probably end up with Linux back on the Silver Bullet. Done. This is where my curiosity about Android x86 comes to an end. Because I've tried running a bunch of these games on here. They'll crash instantly, they'll turn sideways and crash, or they'll require tap to play, and a mouse click doesn't count as a tap. So, the differences between mobile devices that Android is made for and the x86 architecture pretty much preclude my ability to turn anything like this into some kind of Android console, because it won't be able to run reliably. Furthermore, a lot of the games that are available on Android have Steam ports as well. So, I really am it's almost like the Android version of a Hackintosh. But at least it shuts down quickly. Push the power button, you don't even have a restart option, you have to click the power every single time, at least on this hardware and whatnot. But this is where the curiosity ends, because all those games, I downloaded a bunch of games from my Google Play Games account, and they would either instantly crash, turn sideways and crash, or there'd be other issues and whatnot. And even if they worked, we would have had to figure out, like, if you usually tap part of the screen to, like, have it serve as a button or something. It's just too much work for too little results. When there are kits out there nowadays that let you send your phone out to a television and just play with a Bluetooth controller. I might have to look into something like that if I want to play, Android games, or turn a smartphone into an Android gaming console, or at least something with an ARM CPU. But this is where the Android x86 experiment concludes. I'm gonna put something else on Rubbish, and I'm gonna turn this back into a Ubuntu machine. Until next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.
Epic fail.
Well, folks, what a difference a day makes. It is now Sunday, and I've learned quite a bit about Android x86 and how to get it running properly, as well as the unfortunate fact that Rubbish is still restricted by Rubbish being rubbish. So first order of business, for those of you that have been laughing at me up to this point because I'm a rookie to this stuff, Android x86 based on Linux. Linux runs off the ext file system. Using the ext file system when you set the OS up eliminates having to wait forever for that giant user file to be created like what I was dealing with last night. So now it just gets right up and running. Just put a boot flag on it in, like, gparted or something like that before you install the OS, because you have to flag the ext partition as bootable. If you run into any MBR issues or master boot record or whatever, I just set mine back to MS-DOS, because this computer is just a little too old to be using GPT. It wasn't bootable otherwise. I kept going to network boots. So finally, I did get Android x86 working, and as you can see, I've got Crazy Taxi going here, and this is the Android version, and it is struggling, so to an extent, Rubbish is still being rubbish, but these Sega games actually pick up 360 controller support just like that. Unfortunately, that is not the case. I'm not even trying to play, I'm just doing some stuff. Unfortunately, that is not the case with some other games that are too dependent on touchscreens, so that's going to be what the challenge is going to be. Yeah, I'm just driving around until the time runs out. Do I really have 930 seconds left? Stop and pick up a customer! So yeah, this is the Android version of Crazy Taxi, ad-supported, and the game's yelling at me, but the 3D, even on this game from the turn of the millennium, is struggling. Now, when I first got going with this setup, I had every game crashing because of issues with the hardware abstraction layer and the architecture differences between ARM and x86. I'm playing Crazy Taxi like it's Grand Theft Auto and running people over. But anyways, yeah, so I'm not even trying to play. I just want to have something going on the screen. But yeah, that's what happened. Well, what happened was I did some digging. There's an app compatibility layer that probably cuts the performance, but it allows ARM native code to actually run in this OS without instantly crashing everything half the time you start a game. There are still some compatibility issues because some games don't treat a mouse the same way they treat a touchscreen, but some games will actually work right off the bat with a 360 controller or some kind of standardized controller plugged in. I just got to see if I can find some way of getting other stuff working, like games like Sortigo that have on-screen controls where you tap part of the screen. And of course, any game that's meant to be played on a phone is going to have issues when you're trying to use this device as a console. Now, of course, you may notice that I'm playing on the laptop screen. That's because, unfortunately, Android devices are usually one-screen devices, so even though the HDMI is plugged in, I'm just getting a hyphen or a command prompt-ish thingy, so it's not going out to a second screen, which means that, unfortunately, I can only play this stuff on rubbish. I can't use the HDMI for anything. So I'm going to have to look into that and see if there's a way to fix this inside Android. If Android, because some phones had an HDMI out with a mini HDMI or something like that. But either way, wow. Pick up a customer, darn it. Yeah. 7 minutes and 56 seconds, that's right. Wow. Actually, I have the audio muted because this version of the game actually has Offspring music, unlike the Steam version. So, anyways. Yeah, so I'm going to get back to playing this at some point later on, but it's kind of struggling with the 3D, even for a game this old. I don't know if it's because rubbish is rubbish, or if it's because the abstraction layer isn't all that great, but it does work. But I'm thinking I should probably make the silver bullet into an Android box again. There's another issue, of course, with Android, being that usually there's primary storage. Maybe there's some 3D glitching going there. Check out that triangle shadow. Now, there are some issues, there might be some more issues, too, where if you have computers like mine that have multiple drives in them, of course, Android is made for one primary storage and plug-in storage for everything else. I don't really know if there's a way to get around that. Maybe hot swap, plug the drive in and set it up inside the OS after you start everything and treat it as external storage, and then what happens if you have more than one? It may be the case that if I want to build an Android console, I gotta pick up a small computer that only has room for one drive or something like that. Put some decent graphics in it and put an SSD in it and call it with all that stuff. Give it a few gigs of RAM and it'll actually be my answer to the Ouya, kind of like this thing is right now. But Rubbish is definitely handling games a lot better than it did in a Windows environment, so I'll give Android x86 that credit. But this thing, hardware-wise, is actually slower than my smartphone in a lot of respects. It's more in line with the last tablet I had when I was using 7-inch tablets as jumbo-sized computer phones. So I expect the performance of this to be on par with that tablet, minus some percentage points for the hardware abstraction layer and the issues with uniting the two architectures together. I'm also curious if any of these graphical glitches would be solved by going back to the release of Marshmallow as well. But this is the 7.1 Nougat release candidate working on the laptop. I finally got everything working, and I like Android x86 as a lightweight operating system and something you can do with an old computer to give it some use again. So I like the idea of Android x86, but if you're not already familiar with old school Linux, or you had to manually key a few things, it might be a little tricky setting one of these things up. Okay, time to stop getting yelled at by Crazy Taxi. Let's put Android x86 back on the silver bullet for now, for the next part of the experiment, and see how much the performance improves. So with that in mind, let's do this the right way now. I want to install the hard disk. Here comes a bunch of Linuxy looking stuff. Yeah, this reminds me of some old school Linux where you got a wall of text every time you start it up and shut down the computer. Okay, we want to do ext on the SSD. We want to format it to ext. The data's gonna lose. Oh well. We do want the grub bootloader in there. Read-write for debugging, which I think it roots the device or something. I haven't done anything with that yet, but I did see a terminal emulator in there once, so a little Linuxy for a Android port to x86. And let's see here. Come on, this is an SSD. We're probably getting held up by the fact that it's an optical disc. Expect to write all those kilobytes. With what? A pencil? While that's going, let's get the 360 controller plugged into these hackjob USB ports. I remember when I chopped off the housing on a USB hub and got it working this way. Actually, it was a USB something or another. It was supposed to go with a card or something, so it doesn't exactly fit right, but the ports that came with the case lasted a grand total of 6 months before they fell apart from all the plugging and unplugging, so plan B. End of the road. Let's reboot. Gives you a grand total of 1 second. And then once it beeps, we'll pop the disk and we'll do everything off of the hard drive. There we go. Get the disk out of there. Optical disk. Hey! So Grub should be starting up any second now. DMI pool data. There are no DVDs thingies to go off of. Grub is loading. Yeah, Linux. Android 7.1, this is the 32-bit version, since this thing has 4 gigs of RAM and I have no interest in ever upgrading it ever again. Android uses RAM differently than Windows does, but here we are, Android. And this machine, having been an actual gaming desktop, should have a lot more punch to it at some point. Or, excuse me, once this is all set up, should have a lot more punch than Rubbish did. And I think this would be the better candidate for making into an Android console, because it has a little bit more punch versus, and it's not limited. You can actually use the HDMI like I'm currently using right now. Let's get this set up. This is a basic Android setup, and the fun part is, if you have an Android phone, you can use it as a setup token to copy your settings over. Here's the setting that makes all the difference. Enable Native Bridge to support apps with ARM native libraries. Sure, it comes at a performance cut, but that's what this thing was missing beforehand that caused everything to crash. Floppy Cow is keeping the dust off the computer, but this is getting old. Back in Gparted, nuking everything again. I need to find an installer for Android x86 that will actually work with the Wi-Fi nub that's plugged into this thing. Because if you don't have Wi-Fi on the computer you install this thing on, the wired connection is considered cellular data. And you'll have apps throwing fits. Oh, this is gonna suck the heck out of your data plan. No, connect to Wi-Fi. Why do I do stuff like this? Because it's interesting once you figure it out. Whatever. The Nougat release candidate is not properly utilizing the Wi-Fi nub. Let's go back to the Marshmallow release. We're done. Android x86 is a cool idea, and I'd really like to make an Android console out of a computer that can properly support it. But right now, none of these computers are going to do so. This computer will not run with the Wi-Fi nub that's plugged into USB. I gotta find some other Wi-Fi adapter to use in that. Maybe one that runs off a PCI Express or something. And the netbook, Rubbish, will not work through HDMI out. So yeah, the differences between the mobile devices that Android is made for and what your average PC consists of is basically shooting this project in the foot. Both computers are going to get wiped out, and I'll probably have some kind of Linux on both of them for the time being. The bigger priority is to put a lightweight Linux distro on Rubbish, since we know that the Silver Bullet has greater potential as an Android console than that thing does. I would like to find a way to get Wi-Fi working. I just don't know if I need a PCI Express Wi-Fi adapter or one of those ones that plugs directly into the motherboard, or does the Wi-Fi need to be part of the motherboard to begin with? We shall figure this out before we resume this Android console experiment. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.
Give it one more chance.